Welcome everyone to this roundtable, this virtual roundtable on a roadmap to advancing and commercializing a broadband infrastructure. It seems to be a very timely topic, especially as we're all doing these virtual sessions. And we have a great panel of participants today that we're going to be, I'll be introducing in a couple of seconds. A little bit about me. Again, my name is Dan Corey, and I am AECOM's Deputy ITES National Practice Leader, as well as our leader for our transportation broadband services. I've worked with everyone here on this panel, so it's a great group, and I think you're going to have a good opportunity to learn a lot about broadband today. Our goal for this next hour is to take you through a journey. We're going to take you to better understand how to deploy a broadband project, anywhere from starting from policy to talking about planning, talking about how you're going to implement it, operations and maintenance, talk about how you're going to finance it, talking about different types of IRUs or other mechanisms for bringing broadband to your area. I know a lot of us have worked with clients throughout the country and have a lot of questions where people are asking, we understand we want to bring in broadband, we have the need, how do we do it? So hopefully today we'll answer those questions. What I'm going to do here is introduce everyone as we have through the advertisement. I'm going to go down the line. What I do ask for everyone to do is give their name, the business or agency they work with, and also tell me one other thing. Let me know, are you working from an office predominantly now, working from home, or are you doing a hybrid? So I'll start off with Ashley Holmes. Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. My name's Ashley Holmes. I'm the Chief Financial Officer with the ITR Concession Company, who's the private owner and operator of the Indiana Toll Road under the long-term lease with the state of Indiana. I split between home and I split between the office. Our office is pretty quiet here at the best of times anyway, so I'm here at the office today.
Great, thank you. And Ron, why don't you go next?
Great, thank you, Danny. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, ITS America, it's good to be here. I'm Ron Thaniel, Vice President of Public Policy and Legislative Affairs. Just a quick background about ITS America. We are an association of public and private organizations focused on advancing the safe research and deployment of intelligent transportation technologies. We are unique here in Washington. We represent states, city, county DOTs, public transit, MPOs, automakers, technology, infrastructure firms, and research. AECOM, of course, is a very active member of ITS America. Our roots go back to our role as an official advisory board on road technology to the U.S. Department of Transportation. Our vision is a better future transformed by intelligent mobility, one that is safer, greener, and smarter. We also believe that transportation technology should address issues of equity, so everyone gains access to mobility and opportunity. And I'm working from home right now, but I continue to represent ITS America on the Hill. I advocate for intelligent transportation and infrastructure legislation. I'm also a member of our public policy team.
Ron, appreciate it. Thank you so much. And Scott, why don't you go next?
Sure, Dan. Thank you so much. I'm Scott Bergs. I'm the CEO of Vivacity Networks. And I have been oddly working from home. Well, I guess not oddly working from home, but it feels odd to have been working from home now since March and to have not been able to get out and about. But occasionally I do travel to our other offices in Omaha and Virginia. And so occasionally get out, but primarily right here from my home office.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And Jay, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Dan. I'm Jay Jorgensen. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for eX² Technology. And I'm one of the few that probably wasn't impacted too much by COVID from a work standpoint. I've worked from home for 5 years. So probably the only part of my life that wasn't affected by COVID.
Perfect. Appreciate that, Jay. And last but not least, Misty.
Hi, I'm Misty Stine, and I'm the EVP of Business Development for eX² Technology. I have primarily been working from home since March, but I'm in the office today, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad to be here representing this great group of people to talk to you about this program and broadband, and hopefully we can answer some of your pressing questions and guide you through through this opportunity. So looking forward to the roundtable, Dan. Thanks. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Misty. And again, thanks again to ITS America, eX², Vivacity, and the Indiana Toll Road for being participants here. I think all of us can understand the need for broadband as we go through our daily lives. Again, Jay's talking about how he's been working from home for 5 years. Those of us who are road warriors and who travel a lot spend most of our time now in front of little boxes in front of everyone. Homes now are schools. There are businesses, there are doctors' offices, there are places of worship. So broadband plays a very big part in that. And like I said, today the goal is to take you through that journey to understand how to bring forward that broadband plan program for you and for your constituents. So I'm going to start off, Ron, you're going to be take the first question and talk a little bit more about, I know you alluded to it a little bit at the beginning in your introduction, talk a little bit about where ITS America stands in regards to broadband and how you see the advancement of it through the agency and through what you're seeing on the Hill.
Sure. No, well, let me answer. I'm going to answer the second question first.
Okay.
What do I see on the Hill? I've been doing this for about 20 years. My first surface transportation reauthorization was Safety Lou in 2005. And I think my memory is still accurate from that period. Everything else was done, and then we started talking about ITS. Today, it's the other way around. I can tell you firsthand, you look at the DeFazio bill, HR 2, that cleared the House last July, and technology is a key theme throughout that bill. You look at the EPW bill that cleared the committee 2019 on a bipartisan vote. Again, you have technology, and the technology that I'm talking about is broadband and wireless communications throughout that bill as well, the highway title. When I think about this, just as transportation was critical to the development of our economy in the 20th century, and I've spent a lot of time in New York, I've been through that tunnel under the Hudson many times, and how important that tunnel is for the economy of not just Northeast, but the entire nation. I think about our roads and our highways and our transit systems that really built this nation in the 20th century. Broadband and wireless communications are transforming the way we experience transportation today. It is improving the transportation system's performance and operations. We know when there's an issue with the road. I look at the former Tappan Zee Bridge, now the Governor Mario Cuomo Bridge. It is loaded with technology. The New York State Thruway Authority, they know when there's an issue with that bridge. It's also, when I think of broadband and wireless communications, it is the foundation for new models and modes of transportation, including mobility on demand, mobility as a service. Again, you reach in your pocket, you pull out your phone, you know when the transit bus is coming. You know how to get on it, get in a private vehicle, operated now to get from the DOT at Navy Yard to Penn Station. I remember when I first came to DC quickly, and I would go down to the DOT back in 2010, somewhere in that ballpark. You had to wait for a taxi. You hope you got a taxi. Now you have your smartphone supported by broadband and wireless communications to call a vehicle to take you to where you're going. So the way we look at it also, in addition to performance and operations of the system, this is safety. Now, I can talk about more of that in a minute if I have a minute to talk about that. But when we think of broadband and wireless communications, broadband directly supports vehicle-to-everything technology. And this is a technology that is allowing cars, trucks to talk with other vehicles, the infrastructure, pedestrians and cyclists at 10 times per second. It can save lives. It will reduce crashes. And when I think of automated vehicles, and again, this is supported by broadband, V2X technology will allow automated vehicles to do things that an unconnected automated vehicle will not be able to do. For example, automated vehicle technology with V2X will allow vehicles to see beyond line of sight. It will allow vehicles, AVs, to coordinate actions with other AVs so that it's not making a decision individually. At the end of the day, when we look at broadband, and wireless communications. It is the bedrock. It is the foundation of transportation mobility in this country. It is changing the way not just people. I reference a smartphone calling a TNC. It's also dealing with data. Think about it. We've been sitting at home, at least I have, since March. My board of directors, we had a meeting on the Hill on March 11th. 2 days later, essentially the Hill shut down. I've been doing all my work through broadband and wireless communications. So in many ways, this technology is replacing that transportation trip in a vehicle. So again, I think it's critical. It is changing the way we think about transportation in this country. And it's definitely having a major role in the way congressional leaders think about the reauthorization of the FAST Act.
Appreciate that, Ron. Thanks. And I think it's also evident as we were seeing a lot of the news stories and headlines coming. I know FCC, just raised $92 billion for broadband communications. Rural broadband is a key topic to many of the states. Especially as us in the ITS industry, as we're looking to connect not only field devices for that operations or for that safety, but also to use that as a potential backbone to reach out to those underserved communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a great point, Ron. One of the things I did want to mention to everyone else who is listening onto this seminar, there is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. If you do have questions, we do ask that you ask them. One of the things that makes a great presentation is to get information from those who are listening, especially if you want something clarified, if you have a specific topic you want to ask. We have a lot of great experts here on the panel. So definitely encourage you to utilize that function, and hopefully you should see a message from me that just popped up right now, repeating that as well. So Ashley, let's go. Let me move over to you and let's talk about the Indiana Toll Road. Can you take us through a little bit of the thought process of where you were going for your fiber and your broadband rollout? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, certainly, Dan. I think very much what Ron had said, right, was around the safety aspect. When IFM Investors acquired the Indiana Toll Road lease back in 2015, one of the key elements that they were looking to bring as the new owners of the Indiana Toll Road was a real enhancement to safety along the Indiana Toll Road. And at that point in time, we were still running on a microwave communication system from the 80s. So very limited bandwidth, real issues with reliability and maintenance and upkeep. So, the installation of a fiber optic backbone became very obvious and very key. And that was really kind of the first step to bringing the intelligent transportation system to the Indiana Toll Road. Very variable message boards, dynamic message boards, CCTV coverage, all those kinds of elements that weren't possible given the bandwidth limitations of our communication system when IFM acquired the road. And that journey really started back in 2015. When we looked to begin to install that fiber optic backbone, and our first phase of our ITS system was kicked off in 2016 and completed through 2017. And then, at the same time, as we were working with our partners with eX² to build out further the intelligent transportation system on the toll road, we certainly understood the commercial value of the right of way. We're 157 miles of an unrestricted right of way running from Chicago effectively to the Ohio border, and so we certainly started to look down the path of the commercialization opportunities that our right of way brings. But also, we understand that broadband is critical infrastructure, and through our own investments for our own needs, for our own customers, for our own staff, and for first responders, we're able to look to invest further in a commercial broadband backbone that certainly helps deliver that needed critical communications infrastructure to underserved and rural areas of northern Indiana.
Actually, you hit on something before, and I think this is probably one of the most critical things as states, agencies start looking at their right of way and they look for implementing broadband solutions. You said that commercial value. Can you talk a little bit about, and Misty, I'm going to go to you right after us to bring you into this conversation. Can you talk a little bit about what your first thoughts of what that commercial value was? Can you talk about the process that you went through to validate it? And then Misty, can you talk a little bit on your side, how you helped with that commercialization, just to understand, again, that value before we get into other types of aspects?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I think, we certainly see that, the landscaping is ever changing, and, there's only going to be more and more need for that type of technology. It's going to be driven by, the availability of bandwidth, 5G, vehicle to vehicle, all those types of technologies. As part of our agreement, our lease agreement with the state of Indiana, we are not entitled or weren't entitled to generate what we call these alternative revenues. But there was also no incentive for anybody to go and look at these opportunities. If it wasn't going to be us, the state didn't have any real incentive to investigate them. So we worked with the state of Indiana to come up with a framework where they allowed us to go and generate alternative revenue sources, as long as those revenues were strictly reinvested back into the Indiana Toll Road for safety and customer experience upgrades. So we worked on that process starting back in 2016, and over the last 4 years, we've worked through the design, the installation, and now the marketing of our commercial infrastructure program. In terms of the value assessment, it's been a lot of work with the team here with eX². Their deep experience in the space, and what they've delivered elsewhere at other tolling authorities with Illinois and NISTA and various other locations, and just an understanding of what the market is looking for. We're being an unrestricted right of way for a straight 157 miles is certainly attractive, but it's also who you link to and where you link in with. It certainly drives some of those values as well. So it's certainly not my area of expertise. That's why we work with the partners of eX², who we have to help us kind of work through that process, but also working through the process with the state to get them on board with us moving ahead with the project. Just kind of the experience and knowledge of where it's been done before, where it was successful, and I guess ultimately how to successfully navigate the process, because it can take a long time. We knew that going in, and we've been very patient, and our patience was certainly rewarded. But that's kind of the process we went through.
And actually, just to follow up before I go to Misty and to Scott, can you just talk about with Indiana, they did not originally allow for revenue streams coming from the right-of-way. Can you just talk just really briefly about just the time frame that took? Because I think a lot of our other partner agencies who are there right now who aren't toll roads are going to run into that same thing. Are they allowed to have revenue? Are they doing a swap? Can you talk a little bit about that? And then Misty, talk to you about the commercialization, and Scott about what you guys look for.
Yeah, so the first step for us back in 2016 was to amend our concession agreement. Our right to operate the toll road, because alternative revenues were still strictly the benefit of the state. So that took us about a year or so to kind of agree on the change of the agreement to allow us to generate those alternative revenues. But more of the focus was on the use of those funds. And so once we agreed that those funds can only be reinvested back into safety and customer experience upgrades on the toll road, then the state was certainly happy for us to invest money to generate new revenue streams, knowing that it was going to really go back for the benefit of the toll road, for the benefit of the users, and really for the benefit of the state. Okay. And then the next process was, once we were allowed to generate sources of alternative revenues, the fiber commercialization, cell tower, that was kind of the first cab off the rank of what we were really looking at, getting done first. So the process then, was working with the state, and that probably took another 2 years effectively to work through the process, work with all the various stakeholders, certainly with Northern Indiana, with the communications industry, other players, getting everybody on board and kind of articulating what we're trying to do, what the benefits are of a a commercial fiber backbone running through northern Indiana provides for northern Indiana, provides for rural and underserved areas, and how we're going to go about doing it, and obviously how we were financing it. So it effectively took, I would say, about 4 years to get to where we are today. I think our commercial system was hit substantial completion last week. And, we're certainly out there now actively engaging with industry for the commercialization opportunities.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. So Misty, going from now your side, you have an agency that's looking to help commercialize their right of way for broadband communications based on the needs that Ashley was talking about. You talk about the role that eX² took and a little bit about assessing the market need and the market assessment, because I think that's another one of those big questions that everyone asks is there a market, or everyone thinks there's a huge market, and understanding the reality versus what conceptually people are thinking. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. Well, I think, first of all, there's a big difference between addressable market and the opportunity for revenue generation. So addressable market would be the entire marketplace out there that is acquiring or selling broadband. And so that's a pretty big market. In terms of the right-of-way development type projects like the Indiana Toll Road and some of the others that you talked about, New York State Thruway and Illinois State Toll Highway Authority, what you're really looking at in terms of addressable market is the wholesale part of that market. So you're looking at marketing duct, dark fiber, and potentially wireless connectivity along the right-of-way. So you're really looking at marketing infrastructure, just like a real estate transaction. So I think it's important to separate the difference between addressable market and then what you're actually selling or leasing along the right-of-way to third-party users that have a need or a requirement for that particular asset. And by and large, most of the assets that are sold along those corridors are duct, dark fiber, or wireless connectivity. Rarely are you selling lit services along those types of corridors.
And Dan, I think just to go back on that, the open access element of our commercialized system was key, working with the state, working with the stakeholders to allow our project to move forward. But we're building this backbone through northern Indiana, but it's available to anybody on an open access basis, and that was really a key piece of allowing us to move forward with the state and the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Open access is key, and then the other thing that Ashley talked on or touched on was connecting to the right points that others want to be. So, for example, the New York State Thruway, which I was involved in the commercialization of that asset back in the late 80s, early 2000s, there was a huge private investment, and it was a company that I had previously worked for, where we invested in laterals to connect back to the right-of-way in order to attract the users that wanted to utilize the assets on the right-of-way. So we built into all of the major communities along that right-of-way, including Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, et cetera. And it was really driven by the user community that had an interest in acquiring duct or dark fiber on that route. And it's not unlike what we're doing with Indiana Toll Road. What we're finding now is that many of the users want to get to carrier hotels or particular data centers or other communities. And so there's an investment that's made by private investors to make those connections. And in this case, eX², Vivacity, and others are working to bring those to the ITR.
No, perfect. Let me just dive in real fast here. Just look at some of the questions that are coming up. And Ron, I'm going to direct this to you and to Scott. Originally, this is one of the first questions is, as we think about how AT&T drove FirstNet through the federal process, does the panel think a PPP will happen for connected and smart infrastructure in a similar way? And obviously with broadband to help, help drive that as that communication background. Ron, let me start off with you on that. Where do you think you see federal funding opportunities?
Sure. No, I think it's a great question. A priority for ITS America is funding to help states and cities cover the costs for conduit installation, maintenance of the conduit, and also conduit inventory. We think that's key. When we have a state or locality building a road, it makes perfectly good sense to install conduit. It's our hope that there could be a funding stream to make these agencies whole. Because right now, and especially with COVID, I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. And so we are hopeful, for example, in the House bill that passed, the transportation bill that passed the House this summer, Chairman DeFazio set up a Dig Once funding task force, which we worked closely with him on. And the hope is that this task force, if that bill becomes law, will be able to identify funding options to help with broadband infrastructure. Right now, when I look at the DOT programs for broadband, there aren't many. I mean, perhaps you can use the funding out of the BUILD program, which replaced the Tiger Grant program. Perhaps depending on how you look at it, you can use funding out of the Infrastructure for Rebuilding America Infra Discretionary Grant Program for broadband. But it's not enough recognizing the importance of broadband to smart transportation, smart roads. And so it's our hope in this reauthorization of the FAST Act that there will be additional funding, I must say non-highway trust fund funding, to support broadband infrastructure. The only other piece I want to mention is we have an incoming administration that has been very clear that they are focused on funding for broadband infrastructure. And we are hopeful that in the new Congress that there will be an infrastructure stimulus package that would include funding for broadband. So I'm hopeful. I work with rural Republicans on the Senate side that understand the need for broadband funding. I work with urban Democrats in the House representing areas of dense urban cities that need funding for better broadband build out. Dan, I'm hopeful that in the next year or two with, again, the FAST Act reauthorization, the infrastructure package, that we could see more money coming out of Washington. I got to lead, but you also have the USDA programs, you have the FCC, Department of Commerce. So, I am hopeful that we will see more money for broadband.
Perfect. Hey, Ron, thank you so much. Know you have to go and appreciate you spending some time with us here today.
Great.
Thanks
Thank you so much. Great.
All right. Take care. And Scott, so let's go over to you. From Vivacity Network standpoint, how are you looking at those assets, and talk a little bit about both the funding opportunity side and as well as again how you look to and do your investing. And Scott, you're on mute.
Thank you again.
There's always someone, Scott.
I know, Gal, after 6 months of being online, you'd think that I'd have the mute on a conference call for a video call figured out. But thank you again just for the opportunity to be with this distinguished panel today and to talk about this important topic. And my experience in history goes back to 1990. So having 30 years, I've seen the ebbs and flows of both the architecture of the networks and kind of what drives value and what doesn't drive value in times both when networks were largely privately funded, where they've been big periods where there's been a combination of public and private funding, in other areas where it's been almost exclusively publicly funded. And one of the things that stands out to me is that the fundamentals of what makes a fiber route or a communications route valuable haven't changed materially over that 30-year period of time. At the end of the day, it comes down to getting to the endpoints, as Misty and a couple of others have mentioned, that are relevant. Doing so in a route mile efficient manner, and that route mile efficiency gets you two primary benefits. Number one, it lowers overall both capital cost because your fewer miles means lower cost, and secondly, it's a better performance experience. So you're getting a lower latency, you're getting fewer opportunities for breaks in the system and damage in the system, and then ultimately you've also got to get to access that network, not only on those important endpoints and those endpoints have got to be the places where you can access content and access other ISPs for peering and application access. but also interspan access. So as Misty mentioned, when you're going to be connecting a community into a backbone network to be able to utilize that access component is just critically important. So when you have all of those things bundled up, it not only opens up the opportunity for private funding, it on the route itself and makes a case for that internal ROI, but it can make a compelling case for further investment in those extensions to the relevant endpoints and out to the communities to enable last mile providers, individual applications to be extended out to those areas, including some of the things that Ron talked about with ITS and safety, the automated vehicle, the promise that has both from a convenience but also from a safety perspective, but also things like precision agriculture and other distributed workforce being obviously now heightened even in the time of COVID. Just being able to enable those technologies utilizing a cohesive but really shared public-private funding for an open access system, I think just makes a more efficient use of the overall capital.
Perfect. Appreciate that, Scott. And got a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to go through a few of these here. I'm not ignoring the first one that came in on the 5G taking over for broadband. I'm going to get to that a little bit later on. But the couple of questions, actually, the one was for you. It says, were you as the concessionaire holder required to invest all revenue proceeds from the right-of-way used by the fiber, or did you ground lease your interests? And then did you have partners on the fiber side who were able to capture revenues, or is that the only upside increases toll traffic for you all? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. If I don't quite answer the question, let me know. So for us, the kind of the generation of funds and then the use of funds are bifurcated under our concession agreement. They're kind of treated separately. So, any funds generated are transferred to effectively an escrow account controlled by the Indiana Finance Authority as our counterparty, under the concession agreement. We then work with them on the proposed use of funds, and the main use of those funds are going to be, really kind of expanding the ITS system. So, new dynamic message boards, new CCTV coverage, wrong way detection systems. So, there's a bit of a list of projects that we're going to be using those funds on. A highway patrol, roadside assistance kind of specific program, these types of things. So, that's kind of how the funds come in and how the funds will go out. Expanding our ITS system is something that the ITR concession company would have done anyway. It probably may have taken us 5 or 10 years to get there. If we don't have these alternative revenues to fund them. So that's really the benefit to the Indiana Toll Road for investing the capital to install the commercial system is to, allow us to, capitalize on the value of the right-of-way and then, in line with our agreement with the state, reinvest them for the safety of our customers, for the safety of our employees and first responders, and, putting that technology out there that we would otherwise get to, but, given our own capital position is probably not planned till 2030 kind of time frame. So the benefit is bringing forward the use of technology on our road.
But for you specifically, there was no revenue sharing. I know on other deals that are going around the country, there is a potential for revenue share depending on once initial payments, CapEx payments are paid off. There is that revenue share, but specifically for the ITR.
Yeah, so we certainly investigated the funding options. Working with capital partners to invest their capital and deliver the system and taking a revenue share. Ultimately for us, being a very stable piece of core US road infrastructure, our cost of funds are quite low, and for the most part, certainly can't be matched by other private equity, type organizations, right? So it made sense for us to invest ITR capital into the program and to deliver it ourselves because, we can be more patient. And that allows us to, capture all of the revenue upside into our alternative revenue account rather than sharing it with a third party that, has to take into account the time it can take to generate their own returns, to make their own return on capital before that revenue is shared. So we certainly investigated all those options, and there's certainly some pros and cons. Working with that third party, private equity will certainly most likely accelerate your program, right? It'll probably get delivered a lot quicker, and you'll start to get those safety benefits of having the system in place where you can leverage that fiber optic backbone and that communication system to deliver enhanced services for your own facility. But at the same time, if you're able to, and you kind of have a more patient long-term view, the best option for the ITR was to invest our own capital to build this.
And Misty, let me go back to you. So one of the other questions that came up was when a DOT partners with private equity to design and build a fiber optic infrastructure, who owns the infrastructure? And I know you and I have gone on this back and forth, many a times of where that ownership lies, and it depends on the model that's being used. But can you just talk a little bit about what you've seen in different models, and then how that cost is shared based on those models?
Well, in almost every case, obviously the DOT agency owns the underlying right. So they own the infrastructure and they own the underlying rights that the infrastructure sits in. So it's not something necessarily that at the time that we owned. It was owned by the agency. However, the conduit and the fiber optic cable that's installed in the conduit by third parties is owned by the third party carrier. So, and that's in every case. So if they acquire if they acquire a duct and they install fiber in that conduit, they own the fiber that they install for the life of that agreement. And then they have a right of use an IRU, indefeasible right of use of that conduit for the life of the term as well. I think Scott might be the better one to answer the question as it relates to other ownership kind of considerations. But from a revenue share perspective, it's generally really related to whoever makes the biggest investment kind of determines what that share looks like. So in the case of the New York State Thruway, when we started that program with them many years ago, we actually financed the initial construction of that right-of-way until we reached a revenue threshold of meeting 50% of the total cost of construction. And once we received that, then NISTA kicked in their portion of the payment, and then we shared equally in the revenue. In the case of the Illinois State Toll Highway, who paid for the actual build itself, we had an arrangement more along the lines of 85-15 or 75-25. So it really depends on who writes the bigger check. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and what investment they make in that right of way. But in all cases, and I can't think of a case where this wasn't true, there was always an indefeasible right of use for the carriers or for the entities that participated in the investment of that infrastructure. And typically it was a minimum of 20 years. And obviously those agreements are much longer now than they were then. I hope that answers the question, and maybe Scott can help me out here a little bit too as it relates to ownership.
Yeah. When we're looking at developing a backbone route, for example, or a long haul interconnecting route, there, like I mentioned earlier, it really comes down to the uniqueness of the route, to the efficiency of both the speed of building it, as well as the efficiency of the operations, and then the access. What can we interconnect with, and how does that open up the field for us? And so being in a protected right-of-way, for example, and in partnership with a Department of Transportation or a toll road authority provides you a couple of different benefits there. Number one, by definition, if it is a new construction of a road or a new development of the right-of-way, you've got a uniqueness of the route. It's a route that no one else has. You're comparing that value against building it in a parallel route in a potentially open access. But that leads to the second piece, in the speed to build. Oftentimes it provides a value in the speed to build. So that creates some value in and of itself. And then the operational efficiency, you're likely in a controlled access to get fewer cuts of a fiber, fewer disruptions of that right of way than you would in an ordinary open access public right of way. And so all of those are benefits that have to then be offset against, okay, do I own all of the route? Because if you build it in the public open access right away, you own everything, right? And so from a total value perspective, with flexibility on how you can commercialize that and what rates you can charge and who you can, where you can access it and build off of, are 100% within your control. So when you're going into a partnership with a DOT or another right-of-way holder, you've got to balance then that limitation on your freedom to use that asset, and then the benefits that you're getting on the other side, and then that combined with how much capital you're investing versus the ownership that you got really makes the biggest difference. And at the end of the day, clearly the best solution from our perspective is to own everything that we deploy and effectively treat access to the right of way as like a permanent cost would be in an open access or unrestricted right of way. But there certainly are those portions of the fiber that are going to be used for the ITS and other internal uses by the roadway or right-of-way operator. And so finding a balance of shared ownership is easily attainable, provided that we start off by knowing what are those internal uses, what is the expectation of return or opportunity return, and how do we balance that of the right-of-way manager or owner. And how do we balance that against our other alternative, which is we can just go build in a parallel, freely open public right of way. And so it always is a little bit of that Rubik's Cube triangulation. But if we know at the beginning what are the desires, goals of that right of way owner, that's the best way for us to find a relationship and a structure that works for everybody involved and allows us to safely make that capital investment. Because these are long-term investments, clearly. As Misty mentioned, this is contracts that we're signing with our underlying customers are usually in that 20-year to 30-year range. So this has got to be a partnership where we really understand what are the goals of everybody involved for that full 20 to 30-year period of time.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate that. Jay, I know you've been quiet through a lot of this. Didn't forget about you. I want to turn conversation a little bit to your strengths on the construction and the O&M side. Can you talk a little bit about how an agency, as you know, a lot of agencies have their own standards and specifications of how to build. Can you talk a little bit about how, working with those agencies and the telecom companies of finding what that great match is for building and operating and maintaining the fiber, and what are some of the lessons learned that you've seen throughout that? So let's start on the design and standardization, then we'll go to the O&M side.
Yeah, I'd say the first thing I would tell any right-of-way owner that's looking to do one of these type of projects is first focus on your needs, and I thought ITR did a great job of that. Ashley talked about they had an immediate need for more ITS devices. They needed to replace an aging microwave system. So focus on that first, and then I think the market opportunities for commercialization is secondary, but they're there, and have them in the back of your head. So I think the big thing is to be flexible there. In terms of building an extra capacity for yourself, I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle in terms of trying to future-proof it, because the market and technology is going to help you future-proof that system. But simple things like if you think you need multiple cables, put those cables into a single sheath. That creates extra capacity within the system. Naturally, it cuts your cost. It's a win-win. I'd look at, there's a question about 5G that's out there. And I'll take a little crack at that, but I would argue that 5G is going to require more fiber down the road. But I don't think anybody can tell you what that's going to look like exactly. So 5G is
Jay,
not going to.
that was the thing I was waiting for at the end to let people know that 5G isn't the answer. That fiber is going to help and be the backbone of it.
I'm sorry to steal your thunder.
I'm trying to lead them on to the end here. That was.
But yeah, it's we're never going to guess exactly what the future is going to look like. But I can tell you, the market will solve a lot of that. Just looking back 20 years at what we could do with a single fiber, in 2000 or 1995 compared to what can be done with a single fiber today, and what's going to be able to the capacity and the potential of that single fiber 15 years from now. It's a night and day difference. So focus on what you need as a transportation entity to serve your needs and to serve the needs of the motoring public, and then look at how would a telecom company look at my right of way, both in terms of the market value of it and how you build that infrastructure. There's certain ways they look to build an infrastructure, and I think there's a good equal opportunity there for both sides. I thought ITR did a really nice job of going through that process. We had some suggestions and they incorporated a lot of them. I thought the Illinois Tollway, when we built that system in the late 90s, did a really good job of building the system that not only met their needs, but met the needs of the telecom world. And in terms of maintenance, I think the biggest thing, if you're going to commercialize your right of way, look to have one entity that provides maintenance, because you're going to have multiple customers on there, whether that's AT&T or CenturyLink or Verizon, and they're all going to want access. They're all going to want to be out there at the same time if there's a damage or if there's a relocation. And as a DOT or a toll authority, that's not your job every day. And my suggestion would be to hire somebody, and to do that for two reasons. One, it's going to make things more efficient for you. And two, it effectively creates a risk. It reduces your risk, because that entity that you brought on takes on the risk to perform. And while to some degree you're always going to be ultimately responsible, you've pushed that risk down to that contractor that's going to do that type of work for you. And that's what they do every day.
Yeah. And Ashley, let me tie into that. So when the ITR was looking at their O&M, how did you guys determine your SLAs for maintenance? Was that something that you looked toward the telecom community? Did you look for other suggestions? Can you talk a little bit about how you went through? Because I think a lot of DOTs and other transportation agencies, hey, maybe they get capital funding to do the build, but now you have this asset for 30 years. And some will think, oh, we have forces, we'll do it ourselves. And I think, Jay, you hit a great point where that's not what you do every day. You're not out there monitoring fiber. You're not there relocating fiber or doing fiber splices. So, Ashley, could you talk just a little bit about that aspect on the maintenance side?
Yeah, look, I think our perspective was very much the same, right? That's not our core competency, and it doesn't really make sense for us to have really managed that in house. On the SLA front, it's fairly consistent from what I understand kind of across the industry, right? The IRUs, that are out there that are generally executed are fairly standard. So it's a pretty well-trodden path in terms of what those service levels are that the carriers demand of the commercial conduit provider, or all those kinds of things. So really just, taking one of those, standardized IRUs and incorporating that into our maintenance contract was kind of the first path we went down. And, we've also were able to take advantage of, leveraging, eX² is our maintenance partner for our commercial system, as well as for now a portion of our own internal system, because of, just the economies of scale, right? They're out there maintaining our commercial system. They might as well be checking on our own internal system at the same time, right? So, the bigger part for us is more the long dated nature of these contracts. So, you're signing up these 20, 30-year IRUs, that kind of means we're signing up for long-term maintenance agreements with our partners. And, the ITR has been here for a long time, and we expect to own and operate the Indiana Toll Road, until the concession agreement ends in 2081. So we have a very long-term focus, and a lot of diligence is done around making sure you choose the right partner that that your goals are aligned, that, everything sounds good in year 1 or 2, but what happens in year 10? What happens in year 15? What are those methods you have to make sure that, everything's being done? Because as Jay said, right, once you sign up the IRU with a carrier, you're effectively on the hook to meet those service levels, right? And if it's not delivered in-house or it's not your core competency, who you're choosing to look after that system becomes pretty important. So we spent a lot of time on the SLAs and the mechanisms that are in place for a very long-term contract, but really it was much more of a long-term partnership. We've been working with eX² now for almost 5 years, and we were very comfortable with how they were to deal with on the construction and installation side, that we understood generally what we were going to be getting for the long term. But when you're going through that contracting phase, you've got to run down all the paths of the worst case scenarios, and we got to a very good spot at that's certainly how we approached it. That it's it's not our core competency, but these are also long-term agreements, and make sure you do your diligence.
No, great answer there. I'm going to go to a couple of the questions that were asked. Again, that first question where it was, do you need fiber if 5G is going to come and replace everything? I think we did answer that where, 5G still has to come back to a hardline fiber as it's sending and moving that data around. So as was said, I forget if it was Jay or Ashley or Scott or Misty, for who said it was, the more 5G you have, you're still going to have that fiber. You need that fiber as that backbone to that wireless system. One isn't independent of the other. Another question that came up, which I thought was a great one, should a fiber project be treated differently than traditional roadway project? And what is the primarily built to support quarter ITS systems, and should ITS be built concurrently? I'm going to dive in on this just for a couple seconds, since this is what I do on a routine basis, and I'll pass it off to the group. I think we have a lot of customers that will design a roadway segment and maybe have them built by different contractors. So I think one of the things to think about is ITS and your fiber should be one holistic design, should be handled by one person, shouldn't be designed in pieces and parts like you would do a roadway. Have that master plan, understand what you want for that network and how it's going to support your ITS devices. So yes, as you're going out through this build, make sure you have that master plan of where your devices are going to be, where that fiber is going to be, not only spatially where it's going to be, but also as you're looking at your roadway of the future, think about where that right of way or where that edge line, that cartway of that roadway is going to go. Because if 5 years from now, if you're going to expand out another lane or two and you're going to have to spend the money to relocate that fiber, it doesn't make sense. Now, on the converse side of that, also, know that if you're putting fiber on the very end of the right of way and you have to do a lot of clearing and grubbing, there's a lot of rocks and things like that, that's going to be a part of your cost as well. But definitely do that ITS and fiber concurrently, have that plan, and then as you're building out your roadway, either add it to it with that long-range motion, long-range thought in mind, or do it again so far offset from the roadway that you don't have to remove things or relocate things. Jay, any thoughts on that for you?
No, I think that's a great point, especially on where you put your system. Certainly look ahead to your 5 and 10 year plan on what you're going to do with the roadway, with bridge replacements, with new interchanges, and try to avoid those, obviously. But the farther away you get from the center line, the more likely you're not going to have to move that, and that's a cost that certainly can be deferred to the future. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen get DOTs in trouble is not wanting to go out to the edge of that right away, and it's on a very rural route that's probably not a huge issue, but if you're in a metro area, it's going to be an issue for you in the long term.
Absolutely. Perfect.
Just the other piece of that, actually, a big focus for us was we've spent over $500 million since 2015 rehabilitating our highway and bridges, and so the rollout of our ITS program is concurrent with those sections of road that we're rehabilitating. Lane closures and maintenance of traffic setups are very disruptive to certainly our customers. They're certainly not as safe as an operation. When we're doing that construction on the roadway and the shoulders and all those kinds of things. So we make sure that our installation of our ITS program as we can is concurrent with some of those broader construction works where we already have the maintenance of traffic in place and try and get them done at the same time.
Great point. And I'll hit the last question here, and then we'll do some closing remarks with 5 minutes left. Our last question was, do you recommend commercializing only duct and dark fiber, or would you go all the way to offering multi-tenancy, via VLANs, assuming that your networks can support that multi-tenancy rollout? So I'm going to go, who should go on this one? Misty, why don't you start on this? And you're on mute, just so you know.
Yeah, I think probably Scott would be a better one to answer that question. As I'm a duct and dark fiber gal, so I'm gonna let Scott.
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I guess I do have strong opinions about this. I look at, again, the efficiency of the spend to build out the infrastructure and then allowing it to be utilized as efficiently as it possibly can over a 20, 30, 40-year period of time that it's going to be in that primary right-of-way. And I think the best way to achieve that highest level of efficiency is to really stick to commercializing the duct and dark fiber. And that the reason for that is if you're going to provide it on an open access basis, if you're selling those lit services, you're effectively competing with the very customers you're trying to attract from a wholesale standpoint. And once you start to blur that line, you then have to look at what is it that they, as a customer, bring to give value to the fiber that's in the right-of-way system. And the biggest things that they bring are, again, that investment in the extension of that, by definition, limited network to the relevant interconnection points. So they're building out the facilities for last mile to get back to the big internet exchange points, to the application hubs. But as or more importantly, they've got the people, and they have to have the people who operate that lit service network, which is a cohesive service component. So there's multiple different platforms for lit service that operate slightly different from one another. And so the expertise in the operations of that network is critical. And then to be able to provide that lit service, you're talking about a different network operations, personnel and systems. You're talking about sales people who are out there selling to the enterprise customers who would be using that lit service. It's an entire system that requires expertise and investment that is difficult if you're only dealing in a limited piece of infrastructure. So I really strongly believe that the more you stay focused on just the transport layer and the infrastructure provision, it enables lots of different service providers with unique value propositions that they bring to the marketplace and focuses on different verticals to jump in and all utilize that as efficiently as they can.
So basically, stick with the OSP. Stick with the outside plant is what I'm hearing, Scott.
Do what you do best, right? Do what you do best.
And the analogy I'd use is, a toll road or a DOT, limited access. It provides a conduit for a vehicle to go from point A to point B. I'd look at the fiber as no different than that. You don't become a service provider. You don't drive the car for the motoring public. Don't try to provide service for fiber providers. They're going to take care of those needs for themselves. Give them a conduit to get from point A to point B, literally.
I think the last comment I just saw in the chat window was facilitate, don't Dan. Complicate.
Yeah,
go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, I would just, speaking from experience, trying to offer more than kind of the dark fiber, conduit is going to be very challenging. Working with the various stakeholders, certainly in the state of Indiana, the provision of lit services was certainly not the preferred approach by the telecoms of the world. These right-of-ways have historically been restricted access to everybody. For us as a private concessionaire, it's a little bit different, but I would imagine for, broader state agencies, it may be a little more problematic to go down the path of trying to offer lit services. And could really, really extend the time to market of delivering your product if you're ultimately successful trying to deliver those services. But again, assess all of your options, kind of understand what's out there. What are you trying to achieve? What's the time horizon you're looking to get there? There's a whole range of options to get there, but certainly from experience, the dark fiber conduit open access was the cleanest, simplest path for us to get our project to market, and it still took a couple of years.
Well, appreciate that, Ashley. And at this time, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank our great panelists, Ashley, Misty, Jay, Scott, and again, we had Ron there at the first half hour. Thank you, ITS America, for allowing us to speak with everyone for the last hour. And if there are any questions or comments, please reach out to ITS America, or you have those of us who have been on this session. Feel free to reach out to us. Again, thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.